Karalynn Cromeens, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. You're kind of a firecracker. You got a lot going on.
I think it's my red hair. I don't know. That's what people tell me.
So for those of you who are listening to the podcast, as you now know, there's also a video on YouTube that you can watch. But Karalynn, you're a lawyer, specifically a construction lawyer.
Yes, sir. Have been for the last 17 years.
Yeah, you don't have to call me sir. I'm not the judge.
Sorry.
I'm just Dom. Just Dom.
Okay.
Sorry, you've been a lawyer for how long?
17 years.
17 years. Actually, you've got quite an interesting backstory because you're not just a lawyer, you also ran a business in construction as
Correct.
well. Karalynn, why don't I do this? Karalynn, who the heck are you? And how is it you come to be speaking to this worldwide group of cabinet makers, architecture mill workers, and just generally business owners in the construction trades?
Well, I think you really have to go back to my roots. I grew up in rural Illinois. I grew up in the trades. My grandfather was an excavator, owned an excavating company. My uncles were in the trades, the irrigation company, electrical contractor. And so like my first jobs were in that industry and the mom and pop side, right?
Right.
You know, my uncle and my aunt ran the business. My grandmother was in the office, you know, and I was helping out. My mom was in sales. And so we were all there together. And so I think that's how a lot of these smaller businesses are. And so I guess I didn't realize what I was learning at the time, but watching that business operate. And then I moved to Texas and I went to law school.
Oh.
And then in my last year of law school, my husband and I started a material supply business, which is, you know, it started out him and me, and now it's, you know, been in existence, does some killer business. And so as that went along, we started that from the ground up, like I said.
Wow.
Forever hour weeks, just trying to, you know, keep the doors
just get
open.
it off. Yeah, get it off the ground.
Exactly. And then I finished law school, and then collecting our money became a big issue as a material supplier. So I really had to learn lien rights and how all of that works. And then because I was good at that for us, I got people that I collected against actually hired me to collect their money. And so I got a wider range of clients. And then it came to reading subcontracts and drafting contracts. And I come at it from the perspective of I'm in this business to save the businesses I grew up in. In order for me to do that, I have to break down the contracts in plain English.
Right.
I have to know the collection rights inside and out for every person, for every state.
Yeah.
And to tell them the things that I wish I could have told my grandfather's company before it went out of business because he didn't get paid on a golf course job. Right.
Oh.
And so these are legacies.
So there's pain there. There's pain behind the
Exactly. People work their entire lives to build these companies, and they invest their blood, sweat, and tears, everything they have. And it deserves to be protected. And because I've seen so many go the wrong way, I'm very passionate about trying to help. And it's a unique perspective as a lawyer because I'm not out here trying to create conflict so I can build. I'm out here trying to resolve conflict so you can run a better business.
Right. Interesting. And there's a lot behind you. Thank you, by the way, for that intro. I love it because I can still hear the passion in your voice, the gasping when you talk about your grandfather's business. And, you know, blood, sweat, and tears is what people go through. And for people who are listening who think, oh, I haven't gone through blood, sweat, and tears. Well, you have. When you missed your daughter's dance recital or her swim meet, or you missed your son's music or his football game or baseball, like you missed that. You might not think it was a big deal, but your kids did. And that's an investment you made in the company. And now if somebody's not paying you, we have big problems.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Now, today, you and I are here to talk about something near and dear to the hearts of this particular subtrade, which is the increase in the price of materials. And I'll have to admit, before I invited you on the show, I didn't realize you were on the supply chain side. So you'll have some pretty unique insights. But before we get to that, you've also written not one, but two books.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, just by the way, while I'm running a supply company and running a law firm.
And I'm not, you know, my husband's kind of taking his supply. I'm still here as his legal counsel and doer of that, but he runs the day-to-day operations and does a great job.
Of course. What are the books?
So in January, I released, it's a book called Quit Getting Screwed. And it's all about for more commercial contractors or somebody that's going to sign somebody else's contract in the construction industry, all about the bad provisions that are in that contract that can hurt you and how to negotiate them.
So So sorry to interrupt you. So
No good.
does that mean that if I'm the contractor getting a contract from somebody else, what to watch for?
Yes, absolutely.
So that's a flag or an alarm bell that should be going off for our architectural mill workers, anybody doing TIs, tenant improvements, where you're winning a bid and you're being given a contract. Your book is what to watch out for.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And here's the thing is that even if you don't plan on trying to negotiate it because you're afraid of the pushback if you try to change terms, the main thing is that if you understand what's expected, you can perform in a way where you won't be in breach of the contract, or there won't even if you don't want to change a thing about it.
Right.
I just want you to understand everything that's in there so that we can resolve that we don't get into dispute later on.
Sure. And then what's the other book?
The other book is called Quit Getting Stiffed, and it was released in September.
I like your titles. These are very,
it's actually,
good. That's good.
This is actually, it's collection and lien rights for Texas contractors. But at the same time, I launched this in September. I launched the Subcontractor Institute, has the rules for liens in all 50 states. So if you need to know what you need to do, because this is Texas specific, but there I have all 50 states, what you need to do.
And in general, even though that book is written for Texas, in general, they are the same guiding principles for all states, right? I mean, it's
correct. Yeah. It's just that the notices and the things that are required are the same for all states. What's different is the timing of when you have to send what and to who. So the general notices of that you have to send notices up the construction food chain and how are the same. It's just, maybe one of these days we'll get all the states on one, that here's the notices you need to send, because right now it's different in all 50 states.
Yeah, California versus Illinois versus New York versus New Jersey versus Idaho. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Exactly.
So that is quite a lot of depth in the construction market. I'm glad you wrote those books, by the way.
Thank you.
So let's get into it now.
Okay.
Oh, well, we'll talk about the Subcontractor Institute later because you've got
fun.
even more. But so one of the challenges, and we talked about this in the pre-interview when you and I first met, is that right now material prices are going up just because of global issues. They just are. We've got people in Pennsylvania where a certain grade of plywood has gone up $32 a sheet. I remember when plywood was less than $30 a sheet. Now it's gone up $32 a sheet, different grades, different finishes, veneers. But what's happening, and you may know this because of the work you're doing, is we quoted a job in January and we said to ourselves, when I give a price, I stand by my price. So my January price is $40,000 for this kitchen. I'm just choosing a number. Well, June comes along and it's time to actually start building this home because it's finished and material prices have gone up by 30-35%. I'm now going to take a bath on that because I didn't put something in the agreement that said, look, if material prices go up, I need to adjust it for you, Mr. and Mrs. Jones. How do I convert all that thought into something that you can work with to help a company get through this material price increase thing we're going through?
Absolutely. And I think it's a couple facets, right? So the first thing is when you issue your bid, we're going to add language just as plain as you just said it. And what I usually do is if material prices increase more than 2%, we're going to increase the cost of the job is going to go up by that increase.
Oh,
and so just being upfront. And the other thing or you could do that, and you could do, if this bid is not accepted within 15 days, it expires or has to be redone. So you can do those two things together, or you can do one or the other, right?
okay.
And so just putting that language in there when you write your bid to your customer on the residential side. If you're on the commercial side, you need to put that in your bid as well. But sometimes when you submit a bid to a general contractor, they will have a paperwork that they want you to sign when you submit that bid. And basically everything in there just undoes what you just put in your bid about conditioning pricing and all of that stuff. So you need to watch out for that too. That's not done all the time, but I recently had a client that the same situation was actually in the glass world. He bid a job in late 19. The contract didn't come over to the middle of 20. And by then the prices had changed. He didn't sign the contract. He was like, I'm not interested. I can't, he didn't say that. He just didn't do it. And then so the beginning of this year, he gets a demand letter from an attorney saying you owe this general contractor $115,000 because when we hired your scope out, it cost us $115,000 more. And you signed this paper when you submitted your bid that said you guaranteed this price and that we could rely on that price. And so we're still in the process of working it out. I mean, the contract terms say what the contract terms I'd say, and I'm trying to come up with some defenses, but it's not looking good.
Scoundrels. I don't get to use that word very often.
No, and that's why I bring it up, because I think on the residential side, if you're up front with your homeowners when you give them the bid and say, hey, this is a real thing, because they watch the news, they know.
Yeah.
And really, and honestly, if an owner is going to go forward with building something in this atmosphere, the risk should be on them, right? It shouldn't be on the contractor to cover that increased cost. And so, on that side, just being upfront about it. On the commercial side, watching not only what you put in your bid, but what they might require you to sign when you submit it are two important things.
Yeah, the size of the hammer is so much greater on the commercial side. And again, you're drawing a very interesting picture that people might not consider. When we're doing residential work, we're giving somebody the paperwork to sign. So we control the paperwork. And you're a lawyer, I'm just a business guy, but I always like it when I control the paperwork.
Exactly.
Right? Like who owns the paper is a thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And as a lawyer, you know that. I learned it from lawyers. It's very expensive, by the way, to learn that. And now I know it. But and you would hope I was smarter for it. But in the residential world, I own the paperwork. But in the commercial world, somebody else owns the paperwork. But I have to really sign it, or I'm not going to get those gigs. So I guess one of the things you're saying is, as a commercial vendor, as a commercial provider, I've got to be really careful about those clauses. Let's do this. What's the impact? What have you seen of some horror stories where somebody signed a commercial contract and really gotten dinged?
I mean, it goes across the gamut. One of the big things that I always see that contractors on the commercial side miss, especially if they're going from residential to commercial, is they submit a bid, right?
Yeah.
And they get a contract back, and they think that they're hired to do the bid. They're not hired to do the bid. They're hired to do the scope. And if you don't look at them very carefully, they could be very different, right? And so I've had contractors lose, a couple $1,000s to hundreds of thousands of dollars because they didn't realize that the scope that came back attached to that contract was different from the bid. And once you agree to that scope, you're on the hook to do the work, and your bid is no longer part of the agreement. And
so what does that look like? So for this crew here that's listening, we get a commercial job to do, let's say, a restaurant. And I think I'm doing the casework, the woodwork, but it actually also includes the upholstery, the glass, the brass railings, things like that. Is that what you're talking about? Is that's the
Absolutely.
scope? And so suddenly I haven't included glass and brass, or buyouts, they call them. And so I get dinged for that.
Correct. Because once you agree to do it in the contract, it doesn't matter what your bid was. Your bid does not describe the work that they've done. And so that's one of the most common things that I've seen that have hurt people on the commercial side. And sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's not. But either way, it doesn't matter to the contractor that it costs money to.
Yeah. Hey, let me just flip back over to the residential side, because something you said just reminded me of feedback I've had from the residential contractors, the people that are doing kitchen cabinets, built-ins, vanities, bathrooms, maybe even renovations, is I don't want to do material price increases because I don't want to split out my costs to the Mr. and Mrs. Jones. And so I kind of don't do agreements because I don't want to split out my costs. I just give them a price. I don't even know where to go with that, because I find that a difficult place. There's so many, what do you call it? It's a three-legged stool with two legs missing. Like it's so uncertain. Where would you start in that conversation if I was the contractor coming to you?
Okay, so there's a couple different ways that you can do it. The first way is when you add, we talked about the bid, and you need that language in the bid. When it goes from a bid to a contract, you also need that same language in there to say.
And this is on the residential side as well?
Yep. Even if your bid becomes the contract and you have that language, you would be fine to say it would say if the material prices increase more than 3% during while this bid is out, or during the progress of this job, we're entitled to the increase. Okay, so if you don't sign that, if that bid doesn't become your contract and you have another contract that then has a scope and all the other terms, you need to put that same term in there, that during the progress of this job, if materials price increase X, Y, more than 2%, I'm entitled to that extra amount. And so then it becomes, well, I don't want to show my costs. I said, okay, first off, everybody understands that you're in this business to make money. And so I would be open to the idea. You could put a provision in the contract that says it's solely in your discretion as the contractor when that happens, right? Like, I don't have to show you proof that my numbers actually increased. Now, I, as the homeowner's attorney, probably wouldn't agree to that. I'm probably going to want some kind of proof or some kind of estimate from your supplier or something showing that actually did happen. And so that's going to be the fine line you can walk. Like you can put it in there that they're not required to see proof, or you can do it as a cost plus contract, and then here's the cost of the materials. And the cost plus of, I think, especially in this day and age right now, would be a great tool, because you go out and buy the materials, they see how much it is, and you have a certain percentage for your labor that you use on top of it. And that way it's all out in the open. But I understand the concern of them seeing, and here's the thing, that you show them the numbers you with your markup on it already, and then just show how much with on the other side. So you're going to be like, depending on how much the increase is, it shouldn't be that, it may be huge. I'm not sure. And then here's the other thing is that, do all of the materials increase, or does it just one? Is it just one section? I don't know if it's all of them.
So a couple of things come up there. First of all, I think we have to stop apologizing that I'm running a business. I just happen to make cabinets. And in order for me to run a business, I need to make money. You go to work and you get a salary or a wage because you got to make money, right? So when you hire me to do your kitchen cabinets, you're actually renting my shop. You're renting my shop and my crew. So first, and I know for some people, they're driving their truck or walking their dog right now, and they're like, Rubino, I don't know, it's just not my style. But you're here to make money, right? I'm here to provide you. Let me go back. Once upon a time, my son asked me, Dad, what's a business? And it totally floored me. You'd think I would know the answer to this question, right? I think this is the premise of, are you smarter than a fifth grader? Because I didn't know how to answer, what is a business? And I finally came to the answer. A business is a collection of systems that solves problems for other people and makes money for the owner. Pretty simple, right? So I'm solving your kitchen problem. I'm solving your renovation problem. I'm solving your roofing, your tiling, your masonry problem. I'm solving those problems, and I get paid for that. Just like they go to work as an accountant or a CPA or a cook, a chef, a waiter, a waitress, whatever, but they solve other people's problems and they get paid for it. So that's the first thing.
And one other point that I just thought of is that once they sign the contract and you have that material price in there, they're already on the hook to let you finish the work and to let you do the work. So if they wanted to back out because they didn't like the cost of the material increase, they would be in breach of contract.
Right.
So they would be breaking their contract if they thought, oh my gosh, you're just charging me entirely too much for materials. We've already agreed on a price. I'm only coming to you because this much costs this much more. So
yeah. It's a difficult situation, but everybody understands. I mean, if they're listening to the radio, if they're listening to the news, they know that prices of everything has gone up. The other thing that's happening is substitutions. So the slides, the trinkets and trash that gets attached, the handles, the drawer, all of those things, the Lazy Susan, well, those are going up in price as well. And sometimes we just can't get whatever needs to go in there. The slides is a really common thing. So I guess there could be language for that as well, to say that even though we said it's going to be this type of hardware, we have the ability to substitute it. Is that a clause that exists, or is that?
I mean, you could definitely create something like that. You can, and that's the thing, is you have a contract or agreement. I would say that when you're bidding it, I'm hoping that I can get these, the price that is bid on getting these materials in this price range.
Yeah.
If I can't, it's going to go up, but I would give them the option to pick something else in that same price range. Is that a possibility? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean,
the main thing is yes. If I pick something and I come home and there's something completely different, that's going to, and you didn't tell me, that's going to completely, and instead of you being upfront in the agreement saying, hey, I price all this way. If I can't get it, I'm going to let you know, and then you can make the decision. Yeah. And that's the main thing, is just to be upfront about whatever it is.
That you're
and because especially on the residential side, because they have a homeowner has a set of expectations. I'm not saying they're reasonable because they're not from construction, but if you don't take the time to manage those expectations, they're still going to believe that they're right.
Yeah,
and so
that's a great point.
If you don't say, yes, I priced these things with the ones that you picked out, but if they're not available, I'm going to come to you and say, here's the other ones that you can pick.
Alternatives that you can choose. Yeah.
Price range. And you could just put that in your bid or in your agreement, and it doesn't have to have any legalese to be effective.
Hey, let me go just based on what you said there, let me go another direction. How often could these problems be solved by having better communication?
Like 99% of the times. And that's why I offer for a flat fee, a residential contract for all 50 states that's in plain English. I teach you exactly what it means, exactly how to use it. And then so well that you could tell it to your customer if they had, and I have some standard things that I put in there, but then we have an interview and we we find out things that are important to your company. Like I had an interview with the sod guy the other day, and to him, I needed to put in there, if you don't water your grass, I'm not going to be responsible for replacing the sod, right? So every business has got its own little tweaks that need to be added, but some of the things are just basic about here's our schedule, here's what we project. But here's some things that could change that. And another thing is like change orders. When a homeowner hires you as a contractor, they think you're the expert and you know everything. And yes, you do. But if you have to tear something out and it's not what you expected underneath, there could be increased costs. And as long as we tell them that up front, there's, managing expectations and then clear communication when there is an issue. Don't run from it. No. As a law firm, I get a lot of calls from angry homeowners too. And the number one thing that they complain about is the lack of communication. And sometimes it's a hard conversation, but you just need to dive in and listen and then give your response.
Yeah, I agree. And communication is the tough part, especially for people that really get into the business because they're good at making stuff. They're not good at speaking in public. They might not be good with conflict. Conflict or conflict resolution. And it's a tough conversation. And do you want to have that conversation before you have to go home and have a tough conversation with your wife about why you're not making enough money? It's just another tough conversation. But there are systems. There's simple systems you can put in place. So if I'm doing cabinets for the Cromeens family renovation, what I might say at the beginning of the job is, look, every Tuesday at 2:00, we're going to have a quick conference call. Some weeks there'll be nothing to talk about. Some weeks there'll be lots to talk about, but it's every Tuesday at 2:00. And what happens then is the Cromeens family knows, okay, we can wait and hold our questions till Tuesday at 2:00. And I know Tuesday at 2:00, I got to talk to the Cromeens. That's the time to bring it up. And you can bring up and say, the job has gone longer than we expected, so I'm going to need a little bit of money here to pay my guys, or material prices have gone up, or we found asbestos behind that wall. We didn't expect it. And I know that sometimes weekly won't work, but the point here is set a recurring communication schedule with your customer in advance so they feel totally comfortable and they know that they can talk to you. And then you can go off and do all the work you want, except for Tuesday at 2:00, you got to have that phone call.
Absolutely. And some people want that, some people don't, but if you offer that as an option, that way they know when they can, because projects have hiccups. It's just part of the business, right? And when are we going to deal with those things and just have something planned out? I mean, that's the biggest thing, is just open lines of communication, even if it's going to be a difficult conversation. Yeah. And if you did something wrong, just admit it. Don't try to just say, yes, we did this wrong. We're going to do XYZ to fix it. It happens. Things happen.
Changing gears again, back to the contract.
Yes.
Do you think that I could have an effective, like a good, and I'll just say small g good, a good contract in 3 pages or less? Or does it have to be 50 pages? And I know I'm asking a lawyer, but I also know that I have to come to a lawyer like you and say, here are the directions. I'd like you to make this less than 3 pages. And by the way, normal size font. We're not talking about 7.5.
I think mine is pretty skimmed down to everything, and it's like 7.
Okay, that's not too bad.
And then, and 7, but it's 7 in plain English, and it's got clear headings. I could make it smaller, but then I think people would be afraid of it, and I don't want people to be afraid of it.
Sure.
And then, especially if you're on the residential side, each state has some bold legal language required for that state.
Yeah.
So we got to have that
like
in there.
Holdbacks, deposits, and timeframes.
I don't think you could do it effectively in 3 pages. I think 6 to 7 is probably just to make sure we have everything in there about insurance and, and here's the thing is that if you don't have any agreement right now, 3 pages is better than nothing. So
well, I have that conversation quite often as well. Dom, we don't have an agreement. We don't have a contract. We just get people to sign the estimate.
If it's an estimate, at least you have something in writing, because where we end up is, again, managing expectations.
Yeah.
And when we don't do those things, then we get in a dispute, and then it ends, depending on the size of it, somebody gets sued, and then we're in court for years, and that's only the lawyers win there. You don't want to end up there.
No. Boy, wow, is that ever true? I'm so happy that you said that. Only the lawyers win. Yeah.
The best you can hope for in court is to break even, which does not happen most of the time. You're trying to get back whatever you're owed and your attorney's fees.
Well, and not to mention time.
Yeah, you don't ever get anything for your time, which is huge amounts of time.
Yeah, time and heartache. Time and heartache.
And stress. It's stressful.
One of the other things that you mentioned earlier that I want to loop back to, I think it's a great point, where you talked about plain English in the agreements. And sometimes we can't avoid it. There's certain clauses that lawyers have to put together that is just legalese, just because it follows state or federal guidelines, whatever it is. But there's something that I learned. I actually learned this from one of my VPs, my vice president, when I was at Sprint, because I had to do agency contracts with our subcontractors, and those were just
I can't even imagine
horrendous.
those things.
And I looked at it and I said to the guy, I started the position. I said to the guy, I'm like, how am I ever going to explain to anybody that this is a good idea? This contract doesn't sound like something I'd sign. He's like, Don, go read the contract. In the column next to it, you summarize what the clause says in like a sentence, 2 or 3 words. This says, we're going to give you business. This says you're going to pay us for the business. This says you got to pay us in 30 days. This clause says you can't give the business to somebody else. And so I then just trained myself to know each clause and the little thing that it meant, because it really just means something basic. It just sounds scary when you guys go on for a paragraph and a half with no spaces.
But here's the thing, at least in my experience on the residential side, you don't need anything like that in your contracts to be effective.
No, I agree. I'm thinking of the commercial side.
Yeah,
yes.
exactly. I mean, and even then, here's the thing is that even if I want to put these harmful things in the contract, just not only do they do that, but they put it in a way you couldn't understand it even if you read it. And so on the commercial side, not so much on the residential side, because you're drafting your own contract, but and it's just like let's have, if you want to have less disputes and be effective, have a contract that everybody can understand what they're supposed to do.
If you want to have less disputes and be effective, communicate better and never, ever get to the point where you're looking at the contract. I have learned, like this gray hair came at a price. If we're talking about our contract, our relationship is, I'm trying not to use a bad word here. Our relationship is in a lot of trouble. You would file it under carnal knowledge.
Yes, absolutely. And because some of the things you don't even know you have in your contract until your lawyer sees it, and your lawyer is like, look, we got them X, Y, Z. And it's just all those bad terms that you didn't even know were in there and now used as basically swords to crucify somebody.
Yeah.
So
I know we're flipping back and forth a bit, but I do want to ask about on the commercial side. I am given the contract flows downhill to me. What is the form and format that I would go back to the GC? Like, would I do an addendum? Would I do a side letter? Like, what would it look like if I came back and said, look, I need to make sure I get paid every 2 weeks because I have to pay labor, or I need to make sure that material price increases. So they're saying, no, you can't touch our contract. But what could I come back with? What have you seen work where I can go back to a commercial agreement and make addendums, amendments, changes?
I mean, you could do it as addendums or addendum. What you said, I cannot talk.
Amendments and addendums.
You could do it that way because it's got to be changed when both parties agree to it. I mean, obviously, it's preferred that in the body of the agreement we just change it to whatever it's supposed to be.
Sure.
But you can, as long as the parties, whatever it is, you can draft it up in a paragraph in an email and say we're going to hereby modify the contract. You don't have to say hereby. Just you both agree to it in the terms of an email, like, oh, we want to change the contract to say this. Is that your agreement? Yes. And that would be enough.
Sure.
So anything in writing that's agreed to by both parties could change the underlying agreement.
Mm.
You can't do it verbally at all because that won't count.
No, you got to have it in writing.
Exactly. And I know that it's sometimes they put a lot of pressure in keeping the terms that are in their contract, but it's just not a fair business when you agree to those terms in that contract.
No. Well, do you remember back in our prep call, you talked about a pay when paid clause, and I don't know enough to give away any confidences, but if somebody sees that in an agreement, what does that actually mean? Pay when paid.
That means that you could install the best cabinets in the whole world, do the job on time and everything. And if the owner does not pay the general contractor, you don't get paid. And if the owner doesn't pay the general contractor because the plumber did something wrong, you don't get paid. You know what I'm saying? And so like at Subcontractor Institute or in Quit Getting Screwed, there's some language that I suggest that splits the risk, right? What the pay when paid clause does is shift all the risk to the sub, all the risk to the person who's extending credit, buying materials, getting the labor, and then they have to wait to get paid. And now the risk of non-payment is on me, and I have no control over what's going to happen to get me paid. And so
Right.
if we can split that risk. So like some of my suggestions are, all right, I submit my pay app to you. If you're not paid by the owner within 30 days and it's not my fault that you haven't got paid, you'll pay me 50% of that pay app. So at least I have enough to keep operating until you get paid for whatever reason you're not getting paid.
Right.
So, and there's a couple other ideas in there like that, because I understand that the GC shouldn't have to take all the risk, but neither should the sub. There's got to be some place where we can share the risk.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope people got a lot from this. Now, you have a couple other resources out there. You've got the 2 books, Quit Getting Screwed, Quit Getting Stiffed. By the way, when I saw those, because I did my research on you beforehand, and I think you did another YouTube video and said Quit Getting Stiffed. And I'm like, oh my God, like that podcast host took a lot of liberties. And then you came up with a title. I was so impressed. So impressed. But you also have the Subcontractor Institute. And can you take a second, tell us about that?
Yeah. And actually what that is it's a platform, educational platform. And so for free, I teach the 20 chapters that are in Quit Getting Screwed. There's like 80 free forms there. All the lien rules for all 50 states are there, like what you need to do to file a valid lien. I have the paid side is if you want someone to review your contract, you can upload it there and we do it for a flat fee.
Oh, okay.
You can also buy the forms to file lien there too for $200 per state. So I really want it to be an educational platform that contractors can understand their rights. And if they need more help, then they can come to me. But at least they have a basis that if they don't want to come to me or they don't want to hire me, that here it is. And it's really in plain English, because that's what I'm trying to do. Yeah.
And do you help people with collections as well?
Yep. In all 50 states.
Excellent.
I'm I started as an attorney trying to collect my money from my material supply business. So I've gotten very good at it. Phone call. It's not just like most law firms or lien places just send letters. I realize that legally you have to do that. Yes. But that's not what's most effective at collecting your money. It's the phone calls. It's the other things that we do, setting up payment plans or, working with whoever we have to work with.
Communicating is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Communicating.
Exactly.
Are we
Not
back to communicating
letters.
Again? Yeah. Yeah.
Solve the world's problems with communication.
Yeah. Yeah. Karalynn, this has been so informative. I appreciate it. It's been really good.
I'm glad I could help.
Yeah. If somebody wants to get in touch with you or find out more about you and your firm, how do we find you in this big wide world?
So subcontractorinstitute.com
Oh.
or the CromeensLawFirm.com. And both of the books, Quit Getting Screwed and Quit Getting Stiffed, are available on Amazon.
Excellent. Just so I know, or just so people can hear, how do we spell the last name Cromeens?
Cromeens.
Oh, perfect. And so people will find you. And the easiest way to find you, I guess, is through the 2 books or Subcontractor Institute.
Absolutely. And my email's around, so you can email me from there, or the firm's phone number is 713-715-7334. And my customer service guy, Daniel, set you up an appointment. I talk to people directly all the time.
Yeah. Actually, you have a podcast as well, don't you?
Oh, yeah. Quit Getting Screwed podcast.
The Quit Getting Screwed podcast.
Yes.
I understand I am going to be a guest on that show pretty soon.
Yep. I got to get your book and I'm going to read it and then we're going to have you on. So I can read all the things.
Test me against what I wrote in the book.
Well, no, it's just a fun conversation. Like I said, it's all about how, helping people in the construction industry, residential, commercial, run better businesses from the things that I know that I can help with.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for joining us. You've educated and informed the world. There you go. Today's a success.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you. That's what I want here to do. I'm out here to help.
Thanks, Karalynn. Have a great day.
You too.
Okay, bye.